Okay, the Swiss Vetterli bolt-action rifle. I'm going to do this video is basically going to be kind of an overview and a little bit about the history from a collector's point of view and the history of the gun itself. To keep it kind of short, I strongly suggest if you go on Google and Google Swiss Vetterli rifle, there are several websites that cover in detail the different models, the history of this gun, the development of it, and they have photographs of other examples that I don't have. I only have two examples here, basic ones, and give you a much more detailed look at the history and the guns itself. So, you know, if you're looking into the real detailed history, I suggest you do that. I'll start off first by basically giving you the surplus collector's view of these guns. I've seen these rifles around for years, ever since I was a teenager, and they were in a category of what we call wall hangers because you couldn't get ammunition for them. They were obsolete. They're neat old looking guns, but you really couldn't use them, and people literally did hang these on the wall as decorations. I didn't know a lot about them. I wasn't interested in them because, you know, you couldn't shoot them or use them. At least so I thought back then. Back then you couldn't. And so I've seen them around and I've seen the different variations for sale, but I've never really studied them or paid attention. I guess the story on these here is, I guess it was in the 20s and 30s. These were imported into the U.S. and sold on the surplus market through the different surplus dealers. So many and so much of them were here that actually Remington, and I'm not quite sure if Winchester or not, actually made the rimfire ammunition up until 1941 for these guns. They actually made ammo, the rimfire ammo, to use in these rifles. So I guess they were used by people as, you know, like the most in the gun of the time, and so many of them were in the country that there was a demand for ammo that they made ammunition for them. Until, like I said, we'll call it recent 1941. And over the years I've found them, you find them usually in condition of really beat up, or some of them are almost like in mint condition, so you can find them in a variety of conditions, and there's several different models. And this gun is unique in a way as it is the first bolt-action repeating rifle ever adopted by a country as the standard infantry rifle. At the time when it was designed in the 1860s, it was technologically more advanced than a lot of guns out there at the time. And so now I guess we'll get into the history of it. Okay, I'm going to take different breaks here so I keep my thoughts in a train and do this video right. Okay, the American Civil War seen a lot of technological advances in weapons. The man that designed this gun, Frederick Vetterli, was a weapons designer in Europe. He worked on projects for several different countries, and he was highly impressed with the technology that came out of the American Civil War. He was really impressed with the Henry rifle. This here I have my reproduction Henry, which is not like the original rimfire Henry gun, but the thing about the Henry was he used a rimfire self-contained cartridge, which the standard issue was muzzle-loading muskets. It had a tubular magazine, and the way the action worked on this here is you pulled the lever and you had a cartridge carrier. It would come up like this. Okay, and the cartridges were pushed down the tube into the carrier, lifted up, and that's how it repeated. Now if you pay attention to the shape of this bolt in here, you will see that when he designed this gun, the original one was designed in 1867. And if you go on the website, you can see a picture of it. It had an exposed hammer. And that was the prototype. And what he did is, that was 1867, there was a model 1868, 1869, and then the 1869-71, which I believe this model is. And basically what the design was, the original bolt had an exposed hammer, but he got rid of that right away and had an enclosed spring-loaded firing pin in here. Now, the bolt operates, and it has the same thing. There is a cartridge carrier lifter, and you can see it when you pull this back. You can see it fairly well when it operates. And the same principle as the Henry. A tubular magazine, put the case in there, and if you look at the bolt, you actually see it's very similar in shape. Even though this is a bolt action rifle and this is a lever action with an exposed hammer, the basic principle of a tubular magazine, a cartridge lifter, and then that goes back down. So he kind of used some of the mechanical principles in designing his rifle here, which made it a bolt action repeater instead of a lever action. Now this system carried through with the Henry to the Winchester 1866 and the Winchester 1873, which is the same, using a lever. It was very popular. It was, and the tube magazine and the lever action is still used to this very day in a different form. This is the older original form. So Vetterli modified this tube magazine and cartridge lifter into his bolt action design. I'm not sure if they had to pay a royalty for to Winchester, but the design is different enough. I forget what it is with patents. You have to have 30 or 40% different to circumvent the patent to manufacture, but I do believe they had to pay Winchester to use this type of system, the magazine and the lifter. Now, take a break. Now, on the different models, we'll start with the older ones. I don't have examples of them, but this here is a 1860, I think it's a 6971. And the earlier models will look the same, except on this side here, you'll find some with, you'll have two detents in this area. And if you go on the Swiss Rifles website, I've never seen it. They did have, the earlier versions had a magazine cutoff, and there'd be a piece of sheet metal or something that would go in there. I've seen the rifles that have the detents for the cutoff, but I've never seen one with the actual lever on there. They removed it. Also, the earlier models had a dust cover on the receiver, which was eliminated pretty much in short order. This doesn't have one. And the other thing on the earlier models, you will find where this loading gate is, they had a cover. And basically it was a pretty simple device. There was a screw and like a piece of sheet metal that just slid over it to cover it up. They also eliminated that by the 1869-71 model. Also, another feature is the earlier models had these two holes for if a case ruptured. These were to allow the gas out so it wouldn't blow back into the shooter's face. This feature was eliminated on the model of 1878, I believe. But the earlier versions of this gun will have these two holes in there. I believe the magazine held 11 or 12 rounds. I'm not quite sure. 13 altogether with one in a carrier. So you had a bolt action rifle that was fast acting. Okay. Had a magazine capacity of about 13 rounds. And this gun shot flatter and faster. I think the rate of fire on this weapon was 22 rounds a minute, which kind of made it like a huge technological breakthrough at the time. You gotta remember 1868, 1870. We'll compare it to what the other powers were using here in a minute. Okay, at the time, just as a comparison, a lot of the European countries, Germany had the model 1871 Mauser, which was a single-shot bolt action. France had the Gras at the same time around then, which was a single-shot bolt action. Basically upgrades of their needle fire guns. Now, at the time, the world's superpower, Great Britain, was using the Martini Henry, which was a single-shot gun, operated with a lever. You know, pretty fast, but again, single-shot weapon. The U.S. was using the trapdoor, either Allen conversions. This is 1873. And that was their single shot action. So the contemporaries were using weapons of this design, all black powder cartridges. This fired a, let me get that, 10.4 by 38 millimeter. It was a soft lead paper patch bullet with about 58 grains of black powder behind her, 53. Where of course 45-70 was a larger caliber, 45 caliber with 70 grains of black powder, and a British rifle was also about a 45 caliber, but this cartridge contained 80 or 100 grains of black powder. This gun was very powerful as in comparison. So the Swiss developed a magazine-fed rapid-fire gun as compared to the other countries which were using weapons of this similar type here. Okay, now back to the Vetterlis themselves. I'm kind of sorry I'm breaking up here, but like I said, this is the 6971 model. The earlier models had those features which were eliminated by now. And basically, the Swiss made very small changes to the gun over time. Very subtle changes. Now, another thing, there were 9 different manufacturers, which this, when I get into, I will make separate videos about reloading, converting these to center fire, and making ammunition for them. But they had 9 different manufacturers, and it creates a problem, and I'll go over that later in another video. But the earlier guns, some of the changes made is the earlier guns had this, they call it dicing, it's a form of checkering, and they changed the finish, because the earlier guns you always find have the finish turns to this patina, almost like a rust. And the early models, you can tell the difference between the early models is because you had 2 barrel bands and this nose cap, which acts as a 3rd barrel band. But there's no bayonet lug because this used a socket style bayonet that would go on like on the Springfield trapdoors. It went on and rotated. And then with the 1878 model, the way you can tell the difference between the 2 guns is this only has a single barrel band, and there is a lug for, I believe, a knife style. It's more of a traditional bayonet lug up here on the nose cap. On that. So that's how you can tell the difference between the different models, is they made these different changes. One is they eliminated a barrel band in here, and if you notice the stock is wider here, where this one on the later model is more narrower, and the checkering or dicing, as I heard it referred to, was eliminated on the later models. and they use a different style bayonet. Also, like I said, if you notice also the trigger guard was kind of changed, little subtle changes in there. And if you notice on this weapon, the holes were eliminated in the receiver. Also, until the model of 1878, they used a fairly straight butt plate on the rifles. After that, starting with the model 1878, they used this kind of heavy curved style butt plate. And that was on all the later models. Another thing that was changed were the sights. These earlier sights, and if you get a reference book, they'll tell you, you can tell by the graduation on these sights. If you notice how this sight is kind of a smaller design, or this hump here, kind of smaller, that's how you use it. And I believe this model is the last model rear sight. This here is, I believe, a model 1878/81. And a lot of the later models, you could tell the difference between 1878 and 81 generally by the sight. But then one reference said all of them were changed to this later sight at one point in time. So the models they're different models, but they're hard to tell which is which. And also, on these guns, they started marking them with, like, this model 78, 1878. This could be a 7881 because they still marked them 78 even though they made the changes to 81. And you will find them with model 81 on there. This kind of transitional on this. And if you notice, the sight here is, the graduation is different on it than this sight. The graduation is on, like, the face, not the side, on the older sight. So basically that's your differences. If you go to the website, they will list all the models in a chronological order and give you some pictures and descriptions and tell you the changes. Another thing that was changed was the finish. They kept changing how they finished the rifles. As you see, the older style didn't hold up well over time, where this is almost like a commercial bluing. And there were changes to the hardware. I believe this is iron and this is more of a steel. Subtle changes to the stock, the butt plate, and that's kind of it in a nutshell how you'd identify it. They're kind of tricky because I've seen a gun with the smaller sight, one barrel band, and the checkering, which from the online description I have no idea what model that would be. It's in between these two. You know, and like I said, with 9 different companies manufacturing it, there's variances. I think the older guns had more of a variance. I ran into a problem with this one with the chamber size, but I'll go into that later. But basically that's the overall kind of a basic look at these rifles. You know, they can be converted to center fire fairly easily, and that's what I've done. And I know a lot of people ask about the pricing on them. Well, at one time years ago, you could buy these guns for like 10, 20 bucks. People would be happy you took them. But now with the internet and the way information changes and the fact that you can get these to fire again, and everyone posts a way of converting these to center fire, they become popular. People seek them out. And it's kind of hard to find them with good bores. I found a lot of them, the bores must be from the corrosive ammo or the military ammo, are pretty tore up. But if you get one, say like in excellent condition with a nice bore, nice stock, I'd say, you know, I know one guy mentioned it's $400 mark. You go onto the online auctions, people get a little crazy. They have these guns priced at $800, $900, $600, which is way, way too much. A real nice condition, $400. If it's mint without a scratch on it, I'd say maybe $5. And even then, if you get into ones that are a little worn in that but still have a good bore, I think I picked this one up for about $200. You know, but you got to watch out. A lot of them, if you're looking to shoot it, make sure you can either look at the gun or check the bore condition. When people say minor pitting or something, I had one of these I picked up fairly reasonable, but the bore was terrible. I mean, there was no way you could fire it. I think they had more of an iron barrel, and when it corrodes, like on the trapdoors, you get deep, deep pits in there, and there's no way that you're going to be able to fire the gun. So condition is the key. But that's about the going value. I advise you not to pay more. If you got a real pristine example, really, really nice, not more than $400. But that's it. Now I'm going to make videos on converting to centerfire and on how to make ammunition for these. So that's the basic intro.